So, but it really got me to think about the days before analytics. I had to go back in time, and I am dating myself, so a lot of you were probably not even starting your career at the time. But so I had to go back and think, what was it like before we could really measure content? And so I was at Home Shopping Network at the time. I was the director of online content. So this was about 2003. So again, I'm old, and I know it. So Home Shopping Network, though, at the time, they really owned the idea and the concept of buying at home. This was way before Amazon really was making inroads. Home shopping was still the one who people were on their couch and they were buying jewelry, they were buying electronics, so they really owned the market. But it was really back where everything was anecdotal. We had no way to measure anything. So let me just go back in time a little bit, and I had to go on the Wayback Machine and remember what our website looked like back in the day. So this is what it looked like, and again, Amazon was just starting to nip at the heels of HSN, and we had those tabs across the top, it's very Amazon-esque, at least back in the day. And my team owned the jewelry department, along with a couple other departments. We treated it like a department store, your general department store where we had the jewelry, the electronics, all the different areas. My team did jewelry, and we were the largest gemstone retailer in the world at the time. I don't know if that still stands. But here was the jewelry storefront. So you see a lot of banners, very basic navigation, right? So does everyone remember when websites looked like this? It was kind of scary to look back at it. But we also created these things down in the left-hand corner that we now know as content marketing. During the day, we had no idea that it was going to have a name. So we were creating gemstone enhancement guides, necklace sizing guides, all of this utility content. That's what we call it today. But again, we didn't have a name for it. We were just the content team. We were just creating content. So back in the day, this is where it lived, bottom, very hidden away, right? And one of the biggest items that HSN sold were pearls. Pearls was a massive seller for them, again, being the largest gemstone retailer. Pearls was huge. Pearls was it. So we also created a pearl buying guide on top of that. And this was to really help the customer learn about pearls. And, she would shop by occasion. She would shop by what's her skin tone, what's the strand that she needs for certain occasions. And we were educating her. And I say her because 99% of the buyers were women. And then we had a glossary. So we were taking the buyer and the customer down this journey of learn everything you can about pearls. We were creating content. But again, we didn't know content marketing at the time. We didn't even have a name for it. So we had guidance, we had education, we had utility. Let me go back because you don't want to miss this. In the lower right-hand side, you'll see the ring sizer. Is that high tech or what? So you could actually print that out from the website, wrap it around your finger, and then you knew what size ring to buy. I still don't know if there's a better solution out there. I don't think there's an app. Has anyone seen one? Okay, so this may still be the only way to get your ring size, just to print it out. But back in the day, that was one of the most popular areas of the jewelry part of the website, was that ring sizer. Who would figure? So how did we know what content to produce? Again, this was back before we really had analytics and anything formal to look at. Well, what we did was we listened to the customer. We had this massive call center, right? And they took calls constantly 24/7. And they would record it all. And we had this report called Voice of the Customer. And we would look at it religiously. And we would see, what are the trends? What are people asking about? What are these customer service reps asking and wanting to know? And let's take pearls. They wanted to know, what's this word knacker that I keep reading about? Because there's a thing called knacker with pearls that's really important. Or, hey, I don't know what size I wear in rings. Another common question, and I don't know how a customer service person would even answer that. Or I think they actually they told them to take a string in the old-fashioned way to measure their finger. So that's how we figured out what type of content are we going to produce. We just got direct feedback. But there was always this great debate between the content team and the merchandisers. And basically, they were the sales team. If we just had a big, fat buy now button on the website, they'd be fine. They didn't want this content stuff. They didn't understand why we would spend all this time on this Pearl guide. There was constantly this debate. And again, we had no metrics. Yeah, so that's basically where I lived for years. Then Core Metrics came around, and Core Metrics changed our life. So all of a sudden, Core Metrics was installed and implemented. I think IBM owns them now, if I'm not. I think it's IBM who owns them now. And we could measure clicks, traffic, behavior, and it blew our minds because all of a sudden all these fights we were having in the meeting rooms started to die down because now we were going to be able to measure it. And don't even get us started on heat maps. This blew our mind too. We didn't even, does anyone still use these? Yeah, they're awesome, right? They're still awesome today. We used them in TV, but we never knew that they would be possible online. So that was also something that blew our mind. So what we discovered was, as we were looking at the data for the first time in history at HSN, as we were looking at the data, we would see, okay, if we run a campaign, we can look at the clicks, we can see if we can convince them to keep going through the buying cycle, and if we can convert them. And it became this quest because all of a sudden we had data. So core metrics really became the crosshairs by which we tried to figure out how are we going to convince consumers. But we would run both the Pearl Guide as well as the promotions the same way. We treated them like campaigns. And so we decided, okay, now we're going to measure this. We thought we had the full story. Again, remember, sales and content were doing this, and we thought we had the full story because after we got the initial data back, that promotion blew the doors off of sales. We had tons of dollars behind it. Yet, when we looked at the content, the Pearl Guide in this case, and saw what happened, unfortunately, it was awful. It was abysmal. But we were treating the Pearl Guide like a campaign and the campaign like a campaign. So literally, I kid you not, we were looking for jobs. We had people that were ready to quit in the content department. They were ready to walk. They were looking for new careers. Everyone's like, this content thing is never going to take off. Yeah, little did we know. So we had two different shoppers, and this is what we later discovered. Because we kept that Pearl Guide up there, we didn't let it die. We kept it up there. We just didn't promote it very hard. But we watched it over time, several months, and we realized, you know what? We have two different types of shoppers. We have the engaged shopper who wants to immerse herself in pearls. And then we have the beeline shopper who saw it on TV and is like, I want it. I know what I want. Get out of my way. I want to shop, and I want to buy it now. So we had two different types of shoppers, but we really discovered that by accident, just because we decided to go back and look. So that engaged shopper who used that Pearl Guide, she wanted to be educated. She wanted to be enlightened. She got very excited about the product. This is someone who would read the entire guide. And then very, very engaged. And she was a completely different type of shopper. And she was a repeat shopper. Again, we went into the numbers to find this out. She was the repeat shopper. Her shopping cart was often larger. So she wouldn't buy a single item. She would often put not only the pearl earrings, but the pearl necklace in there as well. Or she may also go buy another gemstone altogether because, again, she was more engaged with gemstones as a whole. And then she had a low product return rate. So fascinating enough, because she understood pearls so well, she wasn't sending it back. So we weren't having to deal with the returns. So all of a sudden, we saw this long-term effect completely by accident. So all of this up till now, though, was really anecdotal. Even though we had a way to measure all of a sudden, we didn't know what we were doing. We honestly were just using the metrics because we could. We weren't actually setting out with a strategy and then looking to measure it. It was what can we measure and what do we find? And really going with our gut instincts more than anything else. So then all of a sudden there was this mad dash to content, which I think most of us in this room really are of this era. We remember this. So from 2004 to roughly 2013, there was this mad dash to content. Content Marketing World was born. We had this major convention. Actually, it wasn't massive to start. It was very small. I think there was only like 600 of us the first year. So mad dash, we were all creating these white papers and case studies in the B2B world. We had entire departments that were built in some of the B2B communities as well as B2C. Content really became a household word in the business industry, or in all these different industries. So this was fascinating, but it happened very, very quickly, as you all may recall. And then we got into superficial content. So now that, or superficial measurement, because now that content was a household word and people were excited about content, now everyone just wanted to win the race to create as much content as possible. So we were looking at keywords and we were getting Google points. You know, you remember back in the early days of SEO, it was just, oh, let's just show off and get on the first page of Google. We weren't really looking at the real benefit of that. And Google was just trying to figure out, wait, how do we remain relevant? Being first to publish was huge. That was your competitive points. Having more content than your competitor, again, more competitive points. Google at the time also rewarded that. Vanity content, of course. The shiny thing points with leadership, they would say, hey, we want a video on this, go produce it, okay. Best content. So we were always out to go find out like the best content. So that was really your peer points. And you could go to these conferences and brag about your awesome content. But these early days were the superficial metrics. And it really became a game over and over and over again. And it just became this game of points, points, points. And nobody really knew what the heck they were doing. And it just became like Candy Crush over and over again. But then we got smart. And Google changed their algorithms a couple times, right? Competitors caught up, and then leadership changed. So as soon as you had the shiny points, for the CEO who left and walked out the door, well, that CEO was gone, and you have to start all over again. And spotlight moves on. You come to the conference, you present, the spotlight moves on. So all of this superficial measurement, that was part of our evolution of metrics, but I think a lot of us are happy to see that gone. Now, I think today, where most of us are, we're in the formulaic phase of metrics. And so we're going to go through this a little bit slower and walk through. You're probably somewhere on this scale, because advanced measurement is somewhat, it's not really, it's the most subjective thing ever, because you don't really, every company's different and every team's very different. So what you may call advanced, I may call basic, or vice versa. So right now, let's look at the formulaic metrics that are out there. So the evolved metrics, integrated metrics, top line, and then bottom line. We'll walk through each of these. And you'll probably see yourself somewhere in here. So evolved content. These are really, the evolved metrics are really around our performance as content marketers. So conversion rate. This is the golden metric of all, right? Everyone's looking at conversion. Everyone wants to know whether you're B2C or B2B, that is really what your ultimate goal is. Consumption. Is anybody reading this content? And how long are they spending with it? Organic traffic and conversion, social media traffic and conversion, engagement or action. So amplification, are people sharing your content? Are they sending it on? Are they sharing it with their networks? Stickiness and bounce, is it sugar rush content? Are they just coming and then bouncing right off? Or are they sticking with you and are they actually engaging? Your applause rate, and this I think is, it's not a new metric, but it's a new name for a metric we all know, which is how many likes did you get? How many people are actually commenting or saying great things about your content? So that's the applause rate. And then, of course, the heat maps. And then marketing qualified leads. You in the B2B world know where I'm going with this. Marketing qualified, that really is so that we can look at our performance and say, are we getting the kind of leads that we feel confident handing off to the sales team? So marketing qualified leads, that's really for measuring our own performance. And then content half-life. Who here uses content half-life as a metric? Anybody? I see one hand. Congratulations. So content half-life is the new shiny metric for content performance, and I'm very intrigued by it. My team is as well. And it really, the content half-life is how long does it take to get to the peak of the content's performance and how long does it take to die down. And it really gives you a good gauge for how often you should be creating content, how often you should be publishing content, because it tells you what your consumers of content are doing and how long they're sticking with you before you need to start refreshing your content. Because it's not a matter of quantity anymore, as we all know. It's really about how much are you really giving the user, the reader, the visitor, the consumer. So that content half-life is a pretty interesting one. So those are evolved metrics. And then integrated. So are you measuring your alignment with other groups within your organization? Most often this is in sales. So sales qualified leads. We talked about marketing qualified, but now is sales looking at that list that you gave them and saying, aha, these are qualified. So they get their checklist too of, okay, these are great leads, I'm going to take them, which is different than sales actionable leads. Sales actionable leads is, and this one's very important. For any of you who work with sales teams, you'll know that even though you might have them say this is a qualified lead, it doesn't mean they're actually doing anything with it. They're not making the phone call. They're not sending the email. They're not submitting the white paper for the prospect to read. Actionable leads are leads that are actually in the process of being sold to by the sales team. So again, that's more of a B2B metric. Lead to customer ratio. So this is one that, okay, of all the leads we have, how many of them are turning into customers? So again, aligning with sales. How well is that happening? And then content influenced customer. This is also a metric I'm not as familiar with, but again, we're looking at it very closely now, and we actually have one client that we're integrating this with. So content influenced customer, you know the magic question of attribution. You know, what was the last piece of content that they read before they became a customer? It's so very, very difficult to track. It's a wonderful idea, but this is truly, of all the customers that came in, how many of them actually touched a piece of content? So they were influenced to become a customer. And then internal reach. And again, we also have another client right now that internal reach is almost becoming the golden metric for us, almost more so right now, but just by where they are in their engagement. Internal reach is how many of your folks inside the organization are consuming your own content. I mean, you think about it. You want your sales team to be looking at content. You want your customer service people to be reading your content. You want them to know, because they're trying to actually work with the outside world, they should be reading it before anybody else. So that's an important number as well. And then this one also, average consumption before conversion, so also known as CBC. So this is a very important one too, because consumption before conversion, this is the average number of pieces of content that a prospect or a customer consumes before they make the purchase or before they commit to talking to a salesperson. This is a critical metric because, as some of you know, if the salesperson sees that they've consumed one piece of content and they're in Salesforce or another CRM, they may jump all over them and call them immediately. But if you know as a content team, you know our average customer, they consume 4 to 5 pieces of content, you can actually make the argument or have the conversation with your sales team. Hold off on connecting with them just yet. But you're showing them evidence. You're actually able to show them a number rather than just giving them the Heisman. You're basically saying, hey, hold on. We need to basically wait until we're at least through 3 or 4 pieces of content before you guys start harassing and stalking them. So we're becoming familiar with that one. Top line. So impact on revenue. How many people actually are able to track their impact on revenue? You guys from the same company? Okay, so I see one company here. Anybody else? 2? All right, this is good. Okay, excellent. So this is what I mean sort of by the evolution, and we're all on different scales here. So actually being able to say, okay, we are contributing to sales revenue, and here's how, and giving an actual number. There are different ways to do it within different companies, so we can't cover all of them while I'm up here. But this is an important one because showing that you're having a top-line effect is massive. And very important for all of us as content marketers to start doing, because that's where we really start to gain value within our organizations. The lifetime value of a customer. Anybody now, I know I'm putting everybody on the spot, but does anybody track this? Okay, lifetime value of a customer. This is fantastic for measuring how you're doing with your nurture campaigns. So oftentimes, a customer will have X dollar amount of the value during their lifetime as a customer. Well, if you're doing some fantastic either retention campaigns or nurture campaigns, well, you can really increase that lifetime value of the customer. This can be a deal breaker. And I mean, this is where I see more CEOs really respond, because it's the other side of the funnel. They're through the funnel, they become the customer, and then we forget about them. Well, what about the retention side? Let's make sure that they understand what else we can do or what else we sell, and let's bring up that lifetime value. So fantastic metric if it's appropriate for your organization and if you're ready. And I really feel like this is one of the most undervalued metrics out there because it's like the underdog. Nobody really seems to care after a customer comes in. So this is a critical one. And then content originated customers. We talked about influenced customers, but now you've got originated. If you know that the first contact that they had with that a customer had with your company was through a piece of content, it would fall into this bucket. So again, that can impact the top line. So you're able to really claim the top line and get credit for it. And then bottom line, so impact on profitability. Some may call this also efficiency. That's another way to think about this. So the cost per lead, a lot of us use this as well. So cost per lead is how much, and some people will total up the total sales cost. So everything that the salespeople put into it, everything that the marketing people put into it, basically any technology that we've used, every bit of cost divided by your number of leads. So that's the best way to look at that. So looking at, and then constantly improving on that and really improving on your efficiency. And then customer acquisition cost, similar, very similar metric. And then return on investment, another golden metric. Very, very different with each organization. And it's interesting, we work with a lot of B2B companies or B2B marketers, but ROI really changes from industry to industry and then how far along different companies are with their marketing and their content. So these are the formulaic metrics, and you probably found yourself somewhere on one of these, right? And the problem is all right, so what's the deal? So if this is all there is, that's advanced, that's advanced metrics, what else is there? Well, when digital marketing is combined with analytics, we can do this so well now and so efficiently now, that means you can measure anything right this second. You can measure anything. But the problem with that is that you can also try everything. And how many of you within your organization feel like you're jerked around constantly just because you can measure everything and it's really fun to look it up in the data? All right, I see some heads. I see a few, yeah. So we as content marketers fall into this and we get stuck with trying everything. And the problem with that is content is often still treated like a tool. Don't be a tool. Please, don't be a tool. And it's often disguised as a campaign, and it's talked about like a campaign, and we use this pretty language for it that sounds really PC. But it's often a lot of CMOs, CEOs who just want to flip switches and see what happens. Let's throw this content out there and see what happens. Let's see if we can influence this metric by tossing this piece of content out there. And we've become a tool. And it's not just me saying this, because this is actually, this specific statistic comes from the B2C and B2B content marketing benchmarks, the two reports that come out every year. Over 70% of us say we want content marketing to operate and be seen as an ongoing business process, not simply a campaign. This is what we all want. This was the highest on that page. So over 70%. So a lot of us are feeling like tools. We don't want to be. So we as a community absolutely have to be changing that. So we must be willing to put our metrics where our mouths are, period. And this is much easier said than done, but I think we as a community need to start doing it.